The Great Depression didn't just happen, it was made by trade wars, by bank failures, by leaders who put pride before people. Now, history whispers a warning. Donald Trump's global trade war mirrors the exact policies that deepened the 1930s collapse. Using AI, we've restored these haunting photos to life, so you can see the faces of those who paid the price last time. Will we learn, or are we doomed to repeat their suffering? This is the Great Depression 2.0. This is Florence Owens Thompson, a 32-year-old mother of 7, stranded in a pea pickers camp in Nipomo, California. Her face, etched with exhaustion, became the defining image of the Great Depression. Just moments before this photo was taken, her car broke down. With no savings and no work, she and her children survived on frozen vegetables and birds her sons hunted. Dorothea Lange's photograph exposed the human cost of economic collapse, moving a nation to shame and, eventually, action. Before the crash, there was the roar. The 1920s bubbled with jazz, flappers, and reckless optimism. Josephine Baker, dancing here in 1926, embodied the era's spirit. But the party couldn't last. By 1929, the stock market would wipe out fortunes overnight, and the champagne glasses would shatter. In rural America, survival often depended on the basics. This hand-pumped well in Wilder, Tennessee, was a lifeline. As banks failed and factories closed, millions returned to a life their grandparents would have recognized. Hauling water, growing food, and bartering to survive. The 1920s promised a farming revolution. Machines like the Fordson tractor boosted yields, but they also buried small farmers in debt. When crop prices collapsed, these iron giants became relics, repossessed or abandoned in fields like the bones of a broken dream. Knowledge was hope. This mobile school in Alabama taught farmers new techniques, but soon no technique could stop the Dust Bowl. As the land dried up, so did their futures. Henry Ford's car for the masses symbolized progress. But by the 1930s, many Model Ts were parked forever, their owners now riding freight trains, searching for work. The Chrysler Building, completed in 1930, pierced the sky with Art Deco ambition. Yet below its gleaming spire, breadlines stretched for blocks. America's tallest building stood as a monument to a divided nation, soaring wealth above, crushing poverty below. October 29, 1929, Black Tuesday. Outside the New York Stock Exchange, men stared at ticker tapes in disbelief. $30 billion vanished in days. The Roaring Twenties ended not with a bang, but with a whimper. They called them Okies, refugees of the Dust Bowl, where overfarming and drought turned the Great Plains into a wasteland. These children, photographed in 1935, faced starvation, prejudice, and a world that seemed to have no place for them. Even gangsters played savior. Al Capone, Chicago's most notorious crime boss, opened this soup kitchen, feeding thousands. A twisted irony. In the Depression, bread came from bootleggers while the government struggled to act. They walked not with protest signs, but with hollow eyes. This march in Toronto mirrored hundreds across North America, a silent army of the jobless. In a world where work defined dignity, their very existence became a question no leader could answer. Outlaws turned folk heroes. Bonnie Parker and Clyde Barrow robbed banks with theatrical flair, while newspapers splashed their faces like celebrities. In the Depression's chaos, Americans rooted for criminals who stole what the system had already taken from them. A single rumor could collapse a bank. Here, desperate depositors claw at the doors of New York's Bank of United States, one of 9,000 banks to fail. Savings vanished overnight, turning middle-class families into paupers. Trust itself became a casualty. Protectionism backfired. Senators Smoot and Hawley championed this 1930 tariff, hiking taxes on imports to save American jobs. Instead, Global trade plunged 65%, deepening the depression. A lesson in how fear can fuel disaster. The war would change everything. As men shipped off to battle, women like this riveter in Fort Worth stepped into factories. A quiet revolution. But in the 1930s, such jobs were unthinkable for most. The Depression enforced old roles until desperation broke them. Money was just paper if no one believed in it. Crowds mobbed banks like this one, demanding cash that didn't exist. By 1933, FDR would declare a bank holiday, freezing withdrawals to stop the panic. For many, it was too late. This tractor in Childress County spelled doom for sharecroppers. Power farming boosted harvests but left millions homeless. The very technology meant to feed America instead starved its workers. For walls of scrap wood, a roof of tar paper, this was home for 5 million displaced Americans. The Dust Bowl didn't just destroy crops, it shattered families. Children slept in clothes to fend off the cold, their dreams as thin as the walls. The Depression knew no borders. In Paris, unemployed men queued for bread, their hats clutched like begging bowls. Europe, still bleeding from World War I, now faced a new enemy, hunger without end. Germany's misery fed a darker tide. These men in Hamburg weren't just jobless, they were humiliated. Hyperinflation had already burned their savings. Now, the Depression left them ripe for the promises of extremists. The world would pay the price. Mussolini promised order, but Italy's factories stood silent. These men in October 1931 weren't just jobless, they were ghosts of the industrial age. Across the Atlantic, their American counterparts would soon chant, "We want bread, not bullets." Capitalism's collapse had no passport. In Amsterdam, the unemployed stood in geometric despair, a line stretching into oblivion. By 1933, a third of Dutch workers faced destitution. The global economy had failed and the people knew it. The workhouse, a Victorian nightmare, returned with a vengeance. These men in London faced a cruel choice: starve or submit to prison-like labor. The Depression exposed the lie that poverty was always earned, never inflicted. They fought for their country, now they fought for survival. 43,000 World War I veterans, nicknamed the Bonus Army, camped in D.C. demanding wartime pay. Hoover sent tanks. Flames engulfed their shacks as the U.S. Army drives out its own heroes. The message was clear: even service guarantees nothing. Nature's revenge. This tractor, buried under South Dakota's wrath, symbolized the double catastrophe: economic collapse and ecological ruin. The Dust Bowl wasn't just drought. It was the price of greed, stripping the land until it stripped back. A glimmer of hope. Roosevelt's Civilian Conservation Corps put 3 million young men to work, planting forests, fighting fires, and building infrastructure like this culvert. For $30 a month, they saved themselves while saving the land. The New Deal began here, not with handouts, but with hands at work. The Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act of 1930 was supposed to protect America. Instead, it crippled global trade and starved millions. Now, Trump's tariffs follow the same deadly playbook. Will you stand by and watch history repeat? Hit subscribe to Pulse of History TV, because those who forget the past are forced to relive it. Comment below, stop, if we must learn from these photos, or MAGA, if you still believe the trade war will work.